want.
I feel very called to become a member of the Catholic Church.
Love the Catholic Church. It's just the best place to be.
From the studios of EWTN, this is Open Line. In North America, call toll-free 1-800-585-9396. That's 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985. You can also send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
A tremendous Wednesday to each and every one of you. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your Wednesday to join us on Open Line. Father Mitch still convalescing from his recent cardiac episode. He is back on TV, maintaining that schedule, but it'll probably be another couple weeks before he joins us again on the radio. But fear not, we have a very able replacement today for Father Mitch, and we'll introduce you to her in just a moment. If you've got a question on today's program, the number is 1-800-585-9396. That's toll-free anywhere in North America, and I encourage you to jump in early because it will be crowded late. 1-800-585-9396. If you're outside the United States and Canada, we'd love to hear from you. Your number is 1-205-271-2985, and we'll put you straight to the front of the line at 1-205-271-2985, or you can send an email to openline@EWTN.com. I'm Jack Williams. The lovely and talented Elena Rodriguez produces the program, and your call screener is Mr. Matt Kabensky. As we mentioned, Father Mitch still out as he recuperates, gets his health back up to speed. And filling in for Father Mitch today is moral theologian extraordinaire, theologian, ethicist, cultural analyst, and she's also the Associate Dean of the Augustine Institute, their satellite branch in Orange County, California. And she comes to us live from the Guadalupe Radios. Well, no, not Guadalupe Radios, but she comes to us live from our studios in Orange, California, in Christ Cathedral. Dr. Pia de Solenni. Dr. Pia, how are you?
I'm very well. It's great to be with you.
We appreciate you taking some time to join us today. Many of our listeners will be familiar with you. They've heard you on Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo on several occasions and several other shows. EWTN News Nightly for our TV viewers. You're a frequent guest on that program. And I kind of wanted to start out. You recently had an article published in Crux that talked about what seems to be the flavor of the day when it comes to moral theology, and that's the whole trans movement. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of what you talked about in that article?
Well, I wanted to be provocative. I was intentionally provocative. And, you know, Caitlyn Jenner, Bruce Jenner, when he debuted as Caitlyn, kind of became the spokesperson for the trans community. And within the trans community, there is debate about that. But my point was that suddenly what identified Bruce as Caitlyn were the externals. And even in his interview with Diane Sawyer before he completed his transition, or it's debatable whether his transition's completed, but he said, "I can't wait to become a woman so that I can paint my nails and drink wine with my girlfriends." And I just went, really? Are you kidding me? If you want to paint your nails, go for it. And have wine. I mean, we don't have to go through all this. And then, you know, his debut was on the cover of Vanity Fair, and it was very, I would say, sexually provocative in a lot of different ways. But what it communicated is being a woman is, you know, having breasts and having a really nice hairdo and a lot of makeup. And, you know, he hasn't even completed the transition in terms of his male genitalia. So this is what I see it doing is sending us back, I think, to an old form of patriarchy. And one of the things that I wasn't able to mention in the article, you know, patriarchy, that goes back to the Roman tradition of the paterfamilias law, which meant that the head of the family, the father, had almost absolute right over everybody in the household, including his wife. And in some cases, he could even say that somebody could be put to death. He was morally responsible for putting, for example, a deformed child to death. So he had absolute power, all right? And this notion of patriarchy devolves evolves, throughout the ages. But that's where the original meaning comes from. Within Christianity, we have something very, very different, and that is we have this church that is headed by Christ, and the church is supposed to be respond as bridegroom. And it is only when Christianity appears that we have a large entity that puts women on an equal level with men, starting with baptism, same rite of initiation for men and women, right? So, and there are so many different ways to live the Catholic faith for both men and women within Christianity. It's not to say that Christianity has been perfect, but there's a basis, there's a theology, there's a reality on which to build. And so then we, fast forward into the past few centuries, we've had all these battles over feminism, and some have been good, some have been bad. And now it's 2016, and suddenly to be a woman means that not that your DNA says that you're a woman, not that you were born as a woman. To be a woman suddenly means, again, fake breasts and hair. And so I wanted to challenge that, because to me, that's setting up a new type of patriarchy where, again, men are determining what women are or who they are. And frankly, it's really no different than Hugh Hefner. I mean, Hugh Hefner, the head of Playboy, right? He had his standards for women, and we know what they were, and they were purely external. And so I just wanted to be provocative and look at the trans movement, particularly the trans women movement, in light of this idea of patriarchy, because, again, it's a group of men who feel that they are in the wrong body and want to be women, that are setting the standard now for femininity. And at the same time, we've got the bathroom wars, that started with Target, and they've gone everywhere. I've been traveling the past few weeks, and it's just been amazing. I mean, it seemed like every bathroom sign changed overnight, And I had a great experience the other day. I was in a Starbucks waiting for the restroom, and the signs have changed. If both the restrooms have the outline of a man, a woman in a wheelchair, and a baby, fine. And so there's a line of us waiting, all women, and this man comes up and he says, is this the line for the women's restroom? And this one woman, African, very heavy accent, it was hysterical. She says, no, both of the restrooms are for everybody. You have lost your male privilege. Now you have to wait for us to do our hair and our makeup. And then she laughed and she said, I don't even wear makeup. And so that's been one of the most humorous responses. But, at the end of the day, the issue, no one's talking about women going into men's bathrooms. That's not something that disturbs people. What does disturb people is men going into women's bathrooms. And again, it's this idea, it's a standard that's being set by a certain group of men. And it's debatable as to the issues surrounding their identity. But the question is, this group of men think that they're women simply because of externals. And that, I think we need to challenge that.
Off to a flying start on an open line Wednesday. Moral theologian Dr. Pia de Solenni sitting in for Father Mitch today. If you've got a question for Dr. Pia, the number's 1-800-585-9396. Toll free anywhere in North America. 1-800-585-9396. Open line Wednesday.
The EWTN book of the month for June is Mother Angelica's Answers, Not Promises. Mother's straightforward solutions to life's puzzling problems are written in this practical, humorous, and common sense collection that will help you with your struggles and draw you closer to God. It's available through the EWTN Religious Catalog web store, EWTNRC.com, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or call 1-800-854-6316.
Podcasts of Open Line are available within 24 hours of live broadcast. Go to EWTN.com and click on Multimedia.
EWTN is now on Twitter. Get short, timely messages from EWTN on your computer or cell phone. It's easy to stay up to date on a wide variety of topics. Pro-life news, Vatican announcements, catechesis, apologetics, the latest EWTN programming, and more. You can link to EWTN on Twitter from our homepage or go to twitter.com/EWTN. At work, at home, at school, and on the road, Stay connected to your world with EWTN's Twitter page.
This is John Martinoni, host of Open Line Monday.
Hello, this is Archbishop Charles J. Chaput, the Archbishop of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
This is Jerry Usher, co-host of Take Two with Jerry and Debbie. Thanks for listening to the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
Be sure to check EWTN Radio out on Facebook. You can find us at facebook.com/EWTN Radio. Moral theologian extraordinaire Dr. Pia De Solenni is joining us today in Father Mitch's stead as he continues to recuperate. If you've got a question for Pia De Solenni, the number is 1-800-585-9396. That's toll-free anywhere in North America. 1-800-585-9396. Our leadoff hitter today is Dee in Omaha, Nebraska, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. What's your question today for Dr. Pia?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Dee.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Hey, I'm so glad I get to talk to you. My husband and I are in the process of joining the Catholic Church, and we love everything about it, and including the Pope. And the new Pope seems like he has. We don't want to criticize him, but it seems like he's getting a lot of criticism. And one thing that we've noticed is it seems like he doesn't seem concerned about Christians. He seems like he's more concerned about Muslims. And we have a friend that she went to church with us for a little while, and then she decided it wasn't for her, but she listens to stuff on YouTube and comes back with things that, she calls the Pope the Antichrist or something. But we would just like to know what stance would be a positive stance that we could take with Pope Francis and his stance on, because a lot of Muslims are being being executed in the conflicts in the Middle East, and we feel like they're not getting enough attention. So we were wondering why Pope Francis doesn't seem more concerned about, mentioning the Christians that are not getting the help maybe that the Muslims are.
Dee, thanks for your call. I think you're raising a good question, but it points to another challenge, and that is where do we get our news from? I think if you're following what the Pope says, I used to work for the Vatican newspaper, and I was the copy editor for the English edition, and so I learned very quickly. I mean, I had to read everything that John Paul II said, and I had to make sure that it was properly printed and so forth. And so one of the things that I found was that what the Pope says and what people say the Pope say are often worlds apart. So I would really encourage you to make sure that you're looking to a good news source, something like Zenit or EWTN, that are reporting precisely on what the Church teaches. Because I've been following the Pope's, a lot of what the Pope has been saying, and I see his outreach to Christians it's phenomenal. It's huge. Not only that, there's a bit of a wake-up call. I mean, he's saying, take advantage of this year of mercy, and come back to the Lord. Replace your heart with our Lord's heart. It really is a strong invitation. At the same time, he is also recognizing and making an outreach to Muslims, which I think is part of evangelization. We have to do that. But I think if you look at the overall balance of a content of what he's speaking about, most of the time he's speaking to Christians. I mean, is there a particular instance that you want to bring up?
The European Union to open up the floodgates and let as many people from the Middle East in as what wanted to come in?
Well, that was more to the immigration issue rather than to the Muslim issue. I mean, those are both Muslims and Christians that are coming into Europe. That is a prudential decision. And here I'm going to introduce something that we haven't talked about that much in Catholic circles, and that is that most of the time the Pope, whoever he is, Benedict or John Paul II most of the time was speaking as Karol Wojtyła. Most of the time Benedict was speaking as Joseph Ratzinger. And most of the time Pope Francis is speaking as Jorge Bergoglio. And so these are matters of opinion. They're not necessarily, they don't come under the area of infallible teaching, and they're prudential. And we can people of faith and people of good conscience, you don't have to be a person of faith, can debate whether or not these statements are prudential. But that his open call for immigration is really, it's the humanitarian crisis. I don't think that he's positioning or preferencing Muslims over Christians, and I don't recall any statement in which he said, only let the Muslims come in and not the Christians. I think he's saying this is a huge humanitarian crisis, and we've got to be able to do something. Now, in my opinion, the steps that we're taking, they're Band-Aid steps, but we have to do something. We've just got hundreds of people in these boats coming over, risking everything, their lives, just to be in a safe space. We have to respond with something. Obviously, there are very intricate policy discussions that need to be had in each of these countries within the European Union, but I have never heard anything in those conversations that makes it exclusive to the Muslim population.
Yeah, people need to discuss the ability of Islam to fit in with Western civilization.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, those are very, very valid concerns. And I look, one of the things, if you want to search online, Arianna Fallaci, she was a fantastic journalist, Italian, and she wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal just before we went into Afghanistan, and it was brilliant. She was talking about the fact that she really questioned whether or not it was right to go into Afghanistan. She said when she was part of the resistance in Italy that met the Allied forces, and she said, I don't see those resistance forces in Afghanistan, and I don't know that these people are ready for democracy. These are valid points to debate, and I don't think that there's anything that the Pope has done that precludes these debates, and we should be continuing to have these debates. I don't think there are any easy answers, which makes all the more the case for these debates and discussions, because again, the immediate humanitarian crisis has to be dealt with. You just can't leave these people in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea drowning, all right? But the long-term implications that you're talking about, that's going to take a lot of very careful discussion. And frankly, most of that falls to the role of the laity. We're the ones with the expertise in this, in these areas, in terms of government and policymakers. And this is where we're going to have to lending our expertise to the church.
Thanks so much, Dee. Appreciate the phone call. Next stop for us, Middletown, New Jersey. Steve is listening to EWTN on Domestic Church Media. Steve, you're on with Dr. Pia de Solenni. Steve, are you there? Tell you what, we'll go to Ed in Stuart, Florida, listening on WJPP. Ed, what's your question today for Dr. Pia? Well, Ed, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Ed, what's your question for Pia?
Yes, actually wanted to make a comment, and I just wanted to just say, Pia, I just admire your passion on this transgender restroom issue, and I just wish more people would just get so inflamed about this thing. This is absolutely insanity.
Thank you, Ed. I can't help but agree with you. I think that we really need to be looking at the full implications of this. Again, we're talking about a percentage of the population that's 0.3% or maybe 0.1, depending on whose numbers you use. And there are some very serious implications that are already playing out in terms of how young girls and women are affected. And all we can continue to do, we need to continue to pray about it, but we also need to be prepared to talk about it and to have rational arguments with people people rational talking points. And I would urge you and our other listeners, inform yourself, be prepared with some talking points. A lot of good organizations are doing work on this. One of my favorites is the Family Policy Institute of Washington. The executive director there, Joseph Backholm, did a hilarious video called "The College Kids Say the Darndest Things," and he went onto the campus of Washington, University of Washington, and he interviewed these different college students, and by the end of it, he gets them to agree. I mean, he is a 5'9" white male, and he gets them to agree that he is a 6'5" Chinese woman, age 6 or 7. I mean, I would use tools like this just to provoke the conversation, and we need to arm ourselves with prayer and then with information.
Just a comment, Pia, I'd like to make, and which is really kind of just glaring, and that is, the feminists. I mean, this bathroom madness. I mean, it really put women and children at risk. Certainly, as you said earlier, certainly not men. But the feminists have not uttered a peep, not a peep.
Actually, you know what? I would encourage you to do some research there. There has been a lot of division and friction because the feminist movement has actually been challenging the trans movement, precisely because the feminist movement has fought long and hard for its gains, whether valid or invalid. I think there are some very valid gains. I wouldn't have the job that I have and the education that I have if it weren't for the work of some feminists, all right? But they're saying, we've done all this for women, and now we have this group coming to us and saying that they're women because they feel like they're a woman. What does that mean? Because, again, they change a part of their anatomy and they do their hair, and now they're women. So there's a great article in the New Yorker, and you can probably find it, just say, New Yorker feminist trans disagreement or something like that.
Right.
And that was in 2014. The conversations are being had. Unfortunately, the mainstream media is not reporting on it, but it's a fascinating tension, and actually it may be, if I understood correctly, it was the feminists who first came up with the term of gender dysphoria, meaning these people whose idea of their sex or gender it does not correspond to their biological sex, and they are challenging this. And there's for decades now, the LGBTQ community has been lumped together, and the trans issue is really pushing the issue, and some feminists are very much at odds with it.
Well, good. Glad to hear that.
Thanks,
God
Ed.
bless you, Pia. Keep up the good work, huh?
Thank you. You too.
Appreciate the phone call, Ed. If you've got a question for Dr. Pia de Solenni, the number's 1-800-585-9396. Toll free anywhere in North America. 1-800-585-9396. There was a recent story, Doctor, about a male high school student who competed as a female in the state track meet in, I believe, Alaska. And it really begs the question, there are so many ramifications of this whole trans issue, not the least of which being the effects that it could have on Title IX.
Well, no kidding. And I mean, didn't the Soviets have people athletes kicked out of the various Olympics because they were actually biologically males?
Right.
And so back then, 20, 30 years ago, we were kicking them out, and now somehow the science is no longer relevant, and we're going with some type of a political agenda or some type of sentimentality.
Well, and I think it'll take something like that, something like Title IX that so many have held so dearly, clutched to their bosom with everything they have, to maybe start to get some people to come around to the other side of this issue.
Well, it'll be interesting to see.
Next stop is Wyoming. Leon is driving through the great state of Wyoming, listening to us on Sirius XM Channel 130. Leon, you're on with Dr. Pia de Solenni.
Dr. Pia, hi.
Hi, Leon. Good to hear you.
Hi. I have a question, and it kind of regards justice and scandal. I was recently listening to a program on EWTN where these sisters had approved a transgender teacher for a Catholic girls' school. And it seems to me that I find it difficult that would be tolerated within a church setting. And I wonder why the church doesn't respond more vigorously to that kind of inappropriate behavior.
Well, Leon, I think you ask a very good question. If I'm not mistaken, the situation that you're talking about is a Catholic girls' high school in the Bay Area. And Archbishop Corleone said in a public statement that he met with the leadership of the school. And the school, the sisters, I believe it's Sisters of Mercy. I may be incorrect on that. But they're saying that according to their constitution and Pope Francis on mercy, they've decided to make a prudential decision. Maybe we can get back to this after the break.
We will. We've got more to say about this, Leon, and we'll also talk to Ren in Cincinnati. Matt's also in Cincinnati. Chris is in St. Louis, Missouri, and we've got plenty of time for your phone calls as well at 1-800-585-9396. That's toll-free anywhere in North America. 1-800-585-9396. Open Line Wednesday. Sitting in today for Father Mitch is moral theologian extraordinaire Dr. Pia de Solenni. More to come. Stay right here on EWTN's Open Line Wednesday.
Divine Intimacy Radio.
What we're going to be doing in the coming weeks, in the coming months, I'm very excited to begin studying the writings of Teresa of Avila. We're going to be going through a book called 30 Days with Teresa of Avila. This isn't a book study show, so we're not going to be reading the text necessarily, and line by line going through that. That'd be a little strange for radio. But what we will be doing is reflecting on the wisdom from her letters.
Divine Intimacy Radio, Sunday, 6:30 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 11 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
I'm Raymond Arroyo with Mother Angelica, A Remarkable Life. Mother Angelica went to McKinley High, and in 1940, she failed her junior year. To compensate, she went to summer school, taking a collection of courses that at the time were designed to merely get her a diploma. They included blueprint reading, salesmanship, and economics, all courses that would serve her very well in later life. Stay with EWTN as we continue to celebrate the life and legacy of Mother Mary Angelica.
Whether you're at home, at work, in the car, you can follow what he teaches 24 hours each day. We're EWTN Radio.
And just to let you know, I'm a returning Catholic because of EWTN. Bless you guys and keep it up.
And you're invited to visit our website too. Just log on to www.ewtn.com. That's www.ewtn.com.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
If you're missing your Father Mitch fix this afternoon, be sure to tune in to EWTN Live tonight, where Father Mitch will welcome Robert Riley, and he'll talk about the full scope of the dangers of homosexual culture in our modern world. That's tonight at 8 Eastern on EWTN Radio and television. We're talking with Leon in the great state of Wyoming. And Dr. Pia, you were talking about the situation with the Girls Catholic High School in the Bay Area.
Right. So what happened there was the administration of the school did approach the Archbishop, and they spoke with him and said, look, we have, based on our mission statement and based on Pope Francis's call for mercy, we think that the best choice is to allow this trans person to continue in their role, because that person had already been teaching there. So the Archbishop, from what I recall of his public statement, and again, all of this is easily found online, said that he appreciated decided that the school had come to him and, in so many words, this is a prudential decision. I think that part of the problem you have to recall is that in San Francisco, the Archbishop really took a lot of flack for asking Catholic teachers to hold to the ethics clause in their teachers' contracts, right? That was about a year and a half ago. And so I am not privy to the ins and outs, but as an outsider, I would say that this is kind of a prudential decision. I think we're going to have to be thinking more clearly and carefully as a church moving forward how we handle these situations. And I would say in great part, I think rather than focusing on the rules, we're going to need the rules, but what we really need is conversion. And I think the School of Faith in Kansas has been doing a tremendous job, from what I understand, in terms of educating Catholic teachers. And, I think on my own life, and I think, wow, if I had relied on the formation that I got from the parish, I probably would be in the same boat as a lot of these teachers, wondering where's the church coming from and why do I have to agree to this? And so I was really fortunate. I went to a great Catholic college. I've had all sorts of amazing experiences with different Catholic apostolates and ministries that have been part of my formation. Now, there are some fantastic parishes out there that are changing, and I think we really have to look to what do we do to help bring about conversion and bring about evangelization, because it's only when that happens that we're going to have really comprehensive answers with how to deal with these situations. Simply having a set of rules is going to just put us into a legislative or judicial battle.
Next up is Chris in St. Louis, Missouri, listening to EWTN on Covenant Radio. Chris, what's your question today for Dr. Pia de Solenni?
So it's more of an observation, I guess. I just noticed there's sort of an irony that it seems in recent years there's been kind of a push to take away some of the stigma of mental health issues, and I think for the most part that's pretty laudable. If there's no reason to be ashamed of something that is out of your control. But then at the same time, you have, the transgender community, the homosexual community, who are pushing that it's not a mental, health issue, or it's not a disease or something like that. Why are they so defensive about it when at the same time we're trying to be okay with anyway, so that's my observation.
Chris, you ask a very good question, and I think it's somewhat complex. I would just say initially that there's a lot of things going on. I mean, as you say, it's good that we're recognizing that mental health issues do affect people. Most of the time, they're not through any fault of their own, and people need help. We also need to be honest about how much of a segment of the population is affected. This is just not a one-off thing, but a lot of people are really suffering, and they need to get help. However, as you point out, when it comes to some of the transgender issues, we're no longer considering that a mental health issue. And that's because there's been a shift in the psychology community, starting with homosexuality, to not consider that a disorder. And that happened decades ago. If you go to couragerc.net, I believe is the address. That's the Courage website. You would be able to get more information on this. But homosexuality was no longer seen as a psychological disorder. And so it was very easy then to begin to normalize homosexuality. And we saw this happen in television shows throughout the 90s. It was suddenly, hey, we're going for ice cream and here's my gay friend. And so it was very quickly normalized, and different forms of living sexuality were also normalized. We see, birth rates to single women are more than 40%, as high as 70% in some segments of the population. So there's been a whole lot of normalizing through the celebrity culture, through the media, and so forth. And I think the trans issue was just another step in it. If you're following that type of logic, it makes sense. If you're following the idea that any type of expression of sexuality is okay as long as it's what I want, as long as it's between two consenting adults or however many consenting adults, then this logically follows. And I think that the problem is that we really need to begin to support the medical professionals who are standing behind the science and being a voice for this. I would encourage you to look at Paul McHugh. He wrote a fantastic article for the Wall Street Journal and for different outlets. His Wall Street Journal article has recently been republished, and he was at Johns Hopkins University, and he talked about why they stopped doing the transitioning surgeries, and it was because the outcomes were so negative. And by negative, I mean suicides. Very, very high rates of suicide and mental health complications. So there's been a progression, and there has been an agenda to normalize these things. And I think one of the ways that we need to counter is the science. And Paul McHugh would be a great place to start.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. That's the number Ren used in Cincinnati, Ohio, listening to EWTN on Sacred Heart Radio. Ren, what's your question today for Dr. Pia?
I have a family member that originally she said that she was a lesbian for several years, and then she started dating a young man, and she married him. And then shortly thereafter, she has announced that she's transgender. She's taking the hormone treatment. She's had her breasts removed. And I just want to know, I don't condone the behavior, and I still love her, but as a Catholic, I just don't want to be unchristian, but I can't accept it. I want to know, as a family member, how you go about even dealing with all of this situation.
Sandra, Ren, I would encourage you to contact Courage. I think they would have the best resources for you. And I think that website address is couragerc.net.
It's actually couragerc.org, but couragerc.net will get you there also.
Thank you very much. So I would go to them as a resource, because they're very good at dealing with these very personal issues, and see if there's also a Courage chapter in your diocese that maybe you could get in contact with, because I don't think there's a one-stop answer for this question.
Straight ahead, we'll talk to Sandra in South Dakota, Joyce in Grants Pass, Oregon, Fernando in Clearwater, Florida, and we've still got time for your phone calls at 1-800-585-9396. Continuing our discussion with moral theologian Dr. Pia de Solenni on EWTN's Open Line Wednesday.
From EWTN News Nightly in Washington, D.C., I'm Brian Patrick with your EWTN News Link. The last Super Tuesday of the 2016 primary season hands Hillary Clinton enough delegates to qualify her for the Democratic presidential nomination. Rival Bernie Sanders, who's not yet conceding, meets with President Obama tomorrow. Donald Trump works to convince fellow Republicans that he can broaden his appeal within the party. He tones down his divisive remarks in a noticeably muted speech after his final presidential primary wins on Tuesday. Iraq's effort to retake Fallujah from Islamic State militants continues to creep forward. A senior military official says elite counter-terrorist forces pushes deeper into the city today. The operation began 2 weeks ago. And Pope Francis breaks open Jesus' first miracle during today's public audience in St. Peter's Square. He points to several key moments in the scene of turning water into wine at the wedding feast in Cana that illuminate our understanding of Christ.
Tomorrow on Open Line, Father Larry Richards takes all your calls on evangelization, 3 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
The EWTN home video highlight for June is Living the Scriptures with Mother Angelica. These vintage Mother Angelica episodes will profit your soul and cheer your spirit. Each episode demonstrates Mother's insights, wisdom, and humor, which beautifully penetrate her reflections on the Old and New Testaments. Order your DVD set at EWTNRC.com, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, or call 1-800-854-6316.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question or comment, call 1-800-585-9396. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985 or send an email to openline@ewtn.com.
Keep it right here on many of these EWTN-affiliated radio stations at 4 Eastern, 2 hours of Cresta in the afternoon. Today's special guest host, Jerry Usher. He'll talk to Amy Brooks about how nuns help shape the healthcare in the United States. And Don Johnson will talk about Convinced and Now Catholic, He'll talk about his conversion story. And then at 6 Eastern, 2 hours of Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Aiken in hour number 1 and Devin Schott in hour number 2. Back to the phones we go. Sandra is listening in the great state of South Dakota to EWTN Radio. Sandra, you're on with Dr. Pia De Solenni.
Thank you for taking my call. I really appreciate it. I'm lucky to be able to talk to you because I understand that you work closely with Pope John Paul.
Well, I didn't work closely with him. I met him. He gave me an award for my academic work. I would have loved to have worked closely with him, and I asked him in prayer to help me many times, but I did not work day to day with him.
Okay, very good. Well, I was watching, I'm a Catholic, by the way, but I was watching a program in regards to him writing a book with Anna-Teresa entitled The Acting Person.
Right.
And it's my understanding that they exchanged 130 letters, as well as he gave her his scapula that his father had given him. So I thought I would like to read the book. However, when I go to try and find the book, it sells for between $359 and $900. And I'm just wondering if you have any reflection on that or know anything of it?
Sure. So I think it was George Weigel who may have written an excellent piece on this, and you can probably just Google George Weigel and Anna's name. So there's actually been some pushback on this. Okay, first of all, the secular media wants to sensationalize this because, of course, there's no way that a man and woman could have a close friendship without it being sexual, right? Okay, so we know what their story is going to be, and they just don't have the subtlety and frankly the grace to be able to see the relationships between men and women as anything other than sexual. So we know that he did have this friendship. They did exchange letters. There's no reason to suggest that the friendship was inappropriate. However, she took it upon herself, if I recall the story correctly. He wrote The Acting Person. She took it upon herself to do the translation into English, and it was a very bad translation. And I've seen parts of that translation, and as a philosopher and theologian, my mind just starts to reel. It's just so imprecise. And I remember the first time I was wrestling with it in graduate school, somebody had asked me to do a translation project for them, and I just went, my gosh, what is this person saying? I can't understand it. The Acting Person is a philosophical work. It's very good, and I would encourage you to find a much more current translation. But her translation, it might have been Weigel. I might be, and yet again, I might be mistaken. But I think it was Weigel, and talking about that, she kind of railroaded or ramrodded the entire translation. And again, there were substantial problems with the translation. And I would look for a more current translation to read, simply if you want to go into the thought of John Paul II. It will not reveal anything about the relationship between John Paul II and Anna because it's a collection of his writings.
Is that helpful, Sandra?
It is. And how do you spell George Weigel? How do you spell his last name?
Weigel.
Very good. I thank you so much for
You're
that
welcome.
information.
Next up is Joyce. She's listening in Grants Pass, Oregon at EWTN.com. Joyce, you're on with Dr. Pia De Solenni.
Hello. I wanted to ask what you think is the best way to communicate with a loved one who has what is known as gender dysphoria. And this is a good and sane person, not a frivolous person.
So again, first of all, I would recommend that you familiarize yourself with Courage and the resources that they have there so that you understand a little bit more of what the person is going through. And then, I'd say what we've been taught through the church, charity in all things. And sometimes our actions speak louder than our words. Sometimes we don't need to sit somebody down and say, do you know what the church teaches? Because most of the time they know, and they know what we think the church teaches. But rather to really work on building the relationship and being there in the relationship, and they know what you think. And if they don't, you can clarify that where you find it appropriate. And that's where I think the role of prayer is very, very important. In crossing the threshold of hope, John Paul II said that prayer is the Holy Spirit moving within us. And St. Thomas Aquinas writes along these lines as well in the Summa when he talks about prayer. So I think that it's it's essential to be grounded in prayer when we're facing difficult situations, because we're going to have to know when it's prudent to speak and when it's not. And I think it's also, Cardinal Newman had that wonderful prayer to our Lord, be so in me that others may see not me but only you. And I think we have to think, who's speaking here? Is it me, or is this a prompting of the Holy Spirit? And that takes some careful prayer. And if you have a spiritual director, I would, urge you to consider working with them. But I think the relationship with the person is important, and finding a way to communicate what it is that you understand about their situation. And again, I would really point you to the resources of Courage. I think it's a great place to start.
Does that help, Joyce?
Good answer. I thank you.
You're welcome. And I love
you.
Grants Pass. Grew up close to there.
Good.
God bless you, Joyce. Appreciate the phone call. 1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. And, Pia, I'm guessing that when you embark down the road of moral theology as an avocation, it doesn't take you very long to realize that without compassion, the line upon line and precept upon precept doctrine is not very effective, is it?
It's not, and I think that's one of the key points in the most contentious part of Amoris Laetitia is chapter 8, and I think that it takes that perspective of moral theology in order to understand what's happening in that chapter.
Next up is Matt in Cincinnati, Ohio, listening to EWTN on Sacred Heart Radio. Matt, you're on with Dr. Pia de Solenni.
Hi, Dr. Pia. I'm a devout Catholic, born and bred, 59 years old. My faith has grown stronger in the last 16 years because I'm 100% physically disabled. My question is kind of queuing off of a previous caller from a woman who's becoming Catholic, and she raised the topic of the Pope's stance on immigration and under compassion and mercy. And I know that he, as a young priest in Argentina, was influenced by Perón, and it's safe to say that most of South and Central America is what I call crony capitalism. There's no middle class, there's only the lower, and then the crony capitalist government. And I'm very concerned that under mercy, he's saying that the United States has a moral obligation to accept immigrants. But I think, now, let me say that when it comes to faith and morals, I follow him. But I'm concerned that he's stepping out of his role when he becomes political and says we have a moral obligation to import all the poor people of the world because it's immoral for American citizens. We are impacted. And yes, we need to be, in this year of mercy and compassion, love our neighbors, but I'm very concerned. It's turning me off, and it's scary because Cardinal Donald Wuerl defended him when he came to America and said they should open the borders in the South, let more poor people in. We should export our form of government called democracy. We should export our form of enterprise called capitalism instead of socialism or crony capitalism.
Yeah, I think she's got the gist of it. Dr. Pia, the Pope's comments on immigration?
Yeah, Matt, I'm not sure if you heard at the beginning of the show, but I think that it's really important to distinguish that most of the time when the Pope speaks, he's speaking as who he is. He in this case, Jorge Bergoglio. He's not speaking as the Pope in an infallible matter, all right? So many of these things are matters of opinion, and they fall into the realm of prudential judgment where there can be healthy disagreement. I think the one point on which we can't disagree when it comes to the issue of immigration, there is a crisis, and it has to be addressed in some way. This is a humanitarian crisis that has to be addressed. Now, because it falls again into this realm of the prudential, there are different ways, and I think in an area like this, a good Catholic can say, I agree with the Pope that this is a humanitarian crisis. I'm not sure I agree with the way in which to address this humanitarian crisis. And that's where, again, I think it's really the role of the laity, so many who are experts in the different practical fields that are involved here, whether it's economics, immigration, government, and so forth. This is where we really need to be hearing from the laity and their expertise. And since these areas, again, this is the realm of the prudential, so there's not going to be a black and white answer. The only black and white answer is that we have to deal with the situation in some way. So the Pope in these cases is giving us his opinion, and you, as a faithful Catholic, are free to agree with his opinion or to disagree. The one point where I don't think there's room for disagreement is that simply there is a humanitarian crisis that needs to be addressed. The means and with which to address it, how we'll address it, all right, that's where there can be room for differing opinions.
1-800-585-9396 is our toll-free number. Next stop, Buffalo, New York. John is in Buffalo listening to EWTN on the Station of the Cross. John, you're on with Dr. Pia de Solenni.
Hi. This is triggered by a previous caller. You were discussing that, I think it was psychology now has looked at behavior, homosexual behavior, and they've rethought it as to be not
disordered.
Am I right? Is that what you said?
It's no longer considered a mental disorder.
So, if I look, I mean, I can only base anything on my own life, because let's face it, we can only be who we are. We can't be the other person. We'll never be the other person. But I can use a metaphor similar to this, and that is, I had a friend that suffered from back pain, and I didn't know his back pain, and I thought that he was kind of faking it. And then I blew out a disc, and I got injured, and now I understand his back pain. So, I guess what I'm saying here is that I look at my own life, and I look at my life morally, and I look at the way things have gone in my life. Usually if I go off, I mean, we all stray here and there, but usually if I strayed, where I look at my life where I strayed morally, and I went away from the Lord and did my own thing and everything, I can say that I look at the results of that, and usually my life was a mess. So if I take history, I mean, we all went to history class and we learned about the Roman Empire. We take a look at the Roman Empire and we see what happened to that society. And I mean, we're still using stuff that Rome developed today. And there was a lot of good in that society, but there was also a lot of bad too. But if we look at the society morally, we see that the beginnings of the fall of the Roman Empire happened when it crumbled from the inside.
Yeah, Dr. Pia, there's nothing new under the sun, is there?
No, there's not. And, humanity is always looking forward rather than looking behind. And sometimes we're just so mired in what's the immediate that we don't look behind. And that's where we really need to pray for the prudence to look at where are we coming from? What's the history? Can we learn from the past?
And Mary in Omaha, Nebraska, we'll go to her very quickly, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Mary, you're on with Dr. Pia de Solenni.
Hi, Doctor.
Hi, Mary. Great to have you on.
Thank you. Thanks for answering my question.
Good. We've got about a minute, so make it quickly.
Okay. I never hear the fact that people say, gee, I'm really thankful to have a bathroom to go in, and if I'm dressed as a woman, I'll go in as the women's, and as a man, go in the man's. It should be that simple. I mean, if you're really concerned, as any person, transgender or not, about being there for others and not causing fear and division, then just however you dress, go with.
Well, there's no doubt, Mary, that this has been turned into a political issue, and it's very, very complicated. So there are just so many overlaying agendas here that we kind of need to sift through. And now, because it's become politicized, we're putting people at risk.
Dr. Pia, thanks so much for being so gracious with your time.
Oh, it's been lovely to be with you. Thank you.
On behalf of our host, Dr. Pia de Solenni, our producer, Elena Rodriguez, call screener Matt Kubensky, I'm Jack Williams. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to join us. Back at it tomorrow, talking the new evangelization with Father Larry Richards. Until then, God bless.